I'd like to call to order the Board of Education Finance Committee meeting for Monday, January 13th, 2025. We'll start with public comment. Seeing no one here, we'll move on to item number 3, approval of the minutes for October 28th, 2024. Bonnie, did you receive any corrections? Do we have any at this time? All right, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Oh. Abstain? Sorry. Yes. 2 of 3. We're good. All right. Moving on. Item number 4, discussion and consideration. We have the fiscal year 2023-2024 annual financial report. Dr. Baird, any leading words or jump in? All right.
Okay, well, good evening to the Finance Committee and to all the people here this evening to listen. So as you know, on tonight's regular board meeting, we'll have Scott Denser. He's with Whipley. He's the auditor that overseen our audit. So I want to take a little bit of time to go through that with the Finance Committee just to kind of give you a better overview, because he'll typically give a higher level review of the audit and tell you basically how we've done and where we stand. So maybe this will help you in case you're thinking about some questions that you might want to ask or just some further concerns that you have. So tonight we'll look at a comparative review of our annual financial reports from fiscal year 20 through fiscal year 2024. So a little bit about the report itself. So it's required by the Illinois State Board of Education, and we provide that document to ISB and to the Regional Office of Education. Why? Well, it's good that we have other sources that hold us accountable and want to review our financial data. I believe that it's always good to have the third-party external audit done, just so you have a different set of eyes that look at how well you're doing with your financial reporting. It accounts for all of our local and state and federal transactions, so it gives an overall encompassing view of our revenues as well as our expenditures. And then it should be required of the district because it gives accountability from my office and the transactions that we do to the Board of Education and then to the community. It requires some on-site field work. Some of that is typically reviewing our financial documents in the entirety. It also gives a chance for them to random sample some of the work that we do. So they'll come in and typically ask for a particular month or a typical area of my office to provide data. And we provide that, and they can go through all the records either financially, in electronic format, or some of those, of course, are in paper format. And then it's compiled by our audit firm, and it's provided to the district superintendent and to myself, so we can review that as well to make sure that we're doing what we told the community we would do financially. So that ties into the other parts of the AFR and our budget and our levy, so it makes all those pieces kind of sound when we get through the AFR process. It confirms our accrual basis. That's the basis of accounting is accrual, so that allows the auditor within that 30-60 days after the end of the fiscal year that move something. Most of the time it's taxes that they'll move one way or the other at their discretion. Other than that, the daily actions of our office kind of run on a cash basis. Then it's presented to the board through 3 documents you'll see tonight. You see the annual financial report, which is the required document by the state. You'll see our annual comprehensive financial report, which we submit for review and recognition. And then lastly, management's discussion analysis, which is where the auditor gives his or her opinion to the board of how they believe we've done financially for the year in areas that they want to note that are significant or that they believe they need to point out to you as the Board of Education. Also allows you for some direct interaction tonight with our audit firm, so it kind of takes me out of the way. I'm here, but it doesn't matter. You can ask anything you'd like, and they're here to respond directly to you. So a little bit about the content and the overview of that. So one of the things we've talked about in the past is that financial score. How do we get that financial score from our 3.9 to a 4.0 for recognition? And again, I'd remind the community that it really comes down to the fact of our long-term debt. So in this particular AFR, we had 4 bonds. We paid one off. Actually, we paid one off here as of January 1st, so when we come back next year, there'll be 2 bonds left on that ticket report because we would have retired another one, which then moves us toward that recognition because that shows that we paid off the obligations that we had as a district. When you looked at basic financial reports, whether it be the AFR or the ACFR, I always call those lenses of different financial review, right? So it gives you some different perspectives. We don't run it off of a business forecast where We look at it differently, but we do provide some of these areas of assets and liabilities, our revenue expenditures, so it gives you some different ways to look at how we're doing financially as a district. And then some of the supplemental schedules are some of our taxes, which show the inflow. Our long-term debt, again, is our principal and interest payments that we have, our evidence-based funding, which in the last 2 years has really changed and become more accountable. We have to really spell out how we're using those state funds that we receive and where we're applying those in the education process. Actually, we use those two ways in the district. We use those in the learning environment and in the instruction part of that. And then lastly, we look at some of the operating costs and per capita. So in 2023, the instruction was about $18,053 for an average student to receive their instruction. And on the facility side, it was $19,199. So last year we would have spent $37,252 on a student to educate them and provide the learning environment. This year in the audit, you'll see that that's changed. The instruction now is $18,818, and the facility side is $19,949, or an increase to $38,768 to educate a student. That would have went up because of our capital plan, right? The investments that we've made, as well instruction, as well as learning environment. So you'll see that reflected in this year's AFR.
Do we have any indication at how we compare versus some of our schools that we like to compare ourselves to, such as Batavia or what's the one out west? Sorry, Canelan or St. Charles. Well, St. Charles is a strange one, but we do it. Do we do any of that?
We do not. If you'd like me to, I'd have to pull their AFRs, and I could look at spending. There's some other access information that I have that we do through surveys, so I could compare us through different areas of instruction. I certainly could bring back. I could also provide that to the committee, and you can tell me what you have the most interest in, and I can prepare that as well. And that data is almost a year behind, but so I could do it comparatively from AFR to AFR, or I could just sample certain smaller portions of those and bring it back to the board of areas that you have interest in or want to compare us to. For example, one area that we continue to grow in our spending is our special needs area. So I could look at that. I could look at teachers. I could look at some of our ELL. So it depends what you'd like to see, but I can pull the information. And I have a Kane County group already saved that I use to pull that information. And I could provide that to the committee. You can say, let's look at these things. And I can bring that back to you. And then we can see how we do compare in those other areas.
Yeah, I'm not looking for a large project to look at a number of different things. I was just wondering, is there do we take a look at some of the other ones on a total basis, and then if something was significantly off that couldn't be explained, then you could dig into it a little bit more. But that's what I was kind of considering.
I'll look at certain pieces throughout the year that I maybe have concerns about, where I'm looking at my particular budget and spending to see how that maybe relates to our districts. But I don't look at it in the entirety. I don't think it's very complicated and a lot of work for me or my office. I think we could just simply provide it in an hour or two that we can pull that, because it comes from a database that I simply just filter. Full information, that I can provide it by slide in a comparative review.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think I'll send it to you, and then you can tell me what areas you'd like for me to select, and we can provide those.
Thank you.
Yep. And then I think the last thing is this process gives you some reports, and it gives you some opinions on our audit from the auditor.
Sorry. You said the last thing is the opinions from the auditor. Typically, from my working days, that was the most important thing, right? To get their opinion, that they're satisfied with how you're doing it. I assume that's really what we're working toward here, to get a positive opinion from the auditors.
Right. I think the areas that you're probably most likely to see that I don't think you'll see in our MD&A is latent defects that we have, mishandling of funds, or some other areas in which they have a concern about some of those fiduciary responsibilities or segregation of duties. Those are things that you typically see show up in that report. We've had some of those in the past, and we've resolved some of those just because either our office has grown or we changed the processes that we have. So there's more of some checks and balances internally that seems to satisfy the auditor. So that'll be in the MD&A if there's anything significant. I read through it. I don't see anything that stands out this particular year. In the past, we've had just a few things that we've reviewed with the auditor that we try to make better at, and there's always room for improvement. We'll be moving to a new financial upgrade from our Skyward web base to what they call cumulative, and that's always a chance for us to come back with a different treasurer's report, a different look and some different processes that come out of that. So every time you upgrade something like that, there's some new opportunities, and we'll investigate that as well. Okay, so when we look at the revenues, most of the time we see the typical things. We see ad valorem or taxes. We see fees that we collect, for example, registration or transportation. We look at our personal property replacement tax, which is a business type of taxes given to us. We look at things such as lunch sales. When we look at the state areas of funding, we look at our evidence-based funding, which is the state model that flows through us as a Tier 4 school. We also see some of our private placement that we have, our reimbursement, and our alternative learning opportunities program that we receive money back from the state through the ROE. When we look at the title money, we look at our title grants, our typical IDEA for our special needs area, our Medicaid costs and reimbursements. And in the past, we would have looked at those federal funds during COVID, the CARES that we would have received that's now completed. When we look at our expenses, those are things that we're bound to by our contracts and our working agreements, whether they're salaried or hourly employees, our teachers, our teaching assistants, any stipends that we have, and the cost for our transportation for our bus drivers. Our employment benefits are typically a PPO, an HMO, dental, vision, life. They are some pension obligations in Fund 10 for teachers and Fund 50 and 51 for other employees. And then when we look at our purchase service, those are the things that we can track for. We look at things like things that are provided to us, whether they be engineers or architects or legal fees or just consulting that we have to do. For example, Mr. Wilkes will be presenting on technology. We also use some of the consulting on that side for what we provide. And those are the areas that you'll see that come through. And then supplies and materials are just kind of the nuts and bolts of how we operate the district. Everything from paper to replacing broken, it could be a valve or it could be a faucet. Those all come with that area. Our capital outlay are our big plans that come through our facility task force, which usually have the large dollars of those that end up in Fund 60. Our other objectives, most of the time that's going to be two big dollars there. You'll see it as tuition that we provide to areas like Mid-Valley and Fox Valley Career Services, and the transfers that we have between funds that the board approves comes out of the other objects. And then lastly, our non-capital equipment is that threshold of usually less than $3,000 are just our typical wear and tear. It could be a weed eater, it could be something else that we buy every year. And then lastly, our fund balances, which gives us our position. As you know, we have a board policy and a fund balance policy, so we always monitor that. We're still very healthy in our fund balances. In the AFR, it'll tell you the number of days of we have in cash on hand. You don't want that too low. You don't want that too high. It became an issue during COVID to make sure if we had something happen that we had enough cash available that we could use. Only time in my career I really had to look at cash on hand to see if really forecast how far out this is going to last. Those are all good things about the AFR that they provide us. Our assets, so those are the typical things that the auditor will provide to us. They include our cash, our investments, our taxes received, and our interfund receivables. They're also depreciated, so we have depreciation schedules that the auditor applies for us. And our current liabilities, usually when we look at that, we think of our obligations. Usually those are unpaid bills at the end of the year, so it's maybe some costs that we have in transit between fiscal years. And it really comes down to our principal and interest that we have on our long-term debt. Could also be salaries we owe employees. I forgot that part. That sometimes it carries in between fiscal years. And then when we look at our basic financial statements, the only thing I probably want to point out about that is that, when we look at our funds 10 through 90, which typically comes to you on our treasurer's report, and Fund 94, which is our student activity fees that we're kind of the custodian for as they flow in through our push coin point of sales, and we move those back to the schools to be used. Those are really the areas that we look at that we hold as a district that we report back to you. We do report some other funds, scholarships, or some of our foundations, but those are the ones that we're really primarily responsible for. And then when we look at our disbursements and expenditures we give you the look in this as well. How do we do an instruction every year and how are we funding that? What does our support services look like? What does our community services look like? What are our payments to other governments? And then what does our debt service look like? So I provide that slide that we'll go through just to see how that looks over time. Our transfers are things that we look at in our financial statements that are board approved. And then lastly, our fund balances or our assets. So when we look at our statement of revenues that's listed by source, I think overall this gives the Board of Education a better idea and understanding of our inflows. Where does all of our money come into the district, or a taxpayer or a citizen that one looks at that as well. Then we look at our statement of expenditures. We look at the outflows, essentially is where are our goals and where are our responsibilities and how do we spend that money and what have we purchased and what do we utilize. So there's a very nice part of the AFR that has the expenditure page. It's very detailed in each of the funds about how we spend our money. And I like to say, instead of spending, it's really where we invest it. We look at our ad valorem taxes that are in there as well, so it shows where we levied and what we received. Sometimes we look at what we don't receive, which is very minimal for this district. We look at our long-term debt, which would also include things as leases. In the past, we would have had some technology leases for devices that would have been in there, and we've kind of gone to basically just buying all of our devices. When we look at some of our restricted sources, we look at our tort, which is sometimes where you look at insurance or legal areas, our special education, and our driver's education. Those are basically limited use funds that we can use those for, so they're really restricted. Then when we look at our schedule, other CARES, CRRSA, or ARP, those are all COVID dollars that came through federal grant funds, and we've used all of those. You will see a report in this year. That's the last time you'll probably see that information reported. Then it kind of falls off because those grants are done. And then you'll see our capital outlay and our depreciation, which is our investments and also some of our loss of value over time. And then lastly, as I mentioned, our per capita tuition costs and the cost for our facilities. And then again, any communications that the auditor wants to make to the board. Those are all our statements and schedules that you see throughout the 3 reports tonight. All right, so a little bit about some of our revenue. When I gave you this, it's just, usually you read the line left to right, and, are we growing in our revenue and are we decreasing our expenses? I just wanted to highlight for you tonight, before you get to tonight's presentation, where do some of the changes occur? So we did see our EAV, our equal assessed valuation for our community, go up, which means our property taxes increased and paid to the district through the levy process. We did see an increase in our registration fees. As we've kind of came out, we always talk about COVID as the dirty word now, but it was very difficult to budget because we never knew how some of those things would affect the district. So we see our registration fees kind of come back to where they used to be. Our food services doing well. We'll see that increase. Our property replacement tax. Any of our activity and course fees have seemed to come back to where they normally would be. And then we also have a very full tuition program for our preschool, and we see that report as all increases that reflect the increase of that 5% in our local revenue. State went down a little bit. We did see our private placement go up. We also see our grants go down. And then lastly, the federal dollars went down because the CARES Act has completed our spending. Operation maintenance, mostly it's taxes and a really good investment process that gave us interest income. Really no changes in our state funding there. That's our evidence-based funding that we use for the learning environment. And then there's nothing on the federal side for that. Our debt service, again, is our taxes and our interest income. When we looked at transportation, we did see an increase in our student pay rider fee. So when we have excess capacity in our buses, and anyone over 1.5 miles from the home to the delivery area receives free transportation, but we have excess capacity, then parents can essentially pay a small fee. It comes out to about $2 a school day, and they can utilize that excess capacity. So we did see that come back to where it used to be for that transportation. And then for the state revenue, we did see an increase, and that has to do with 2 things, our claims and our depreciation, that we received some funding back on that. The rest of those are really taxes and interest income, and that's really our revenue. So overall, when we looked at our revenue for the year, it did increase from the $113 million to the $119 million. All right, when we look at our expenditure areas, again, some of the things that stand out are, our increases in our salaries and our contracts and our obligations. I did see an increase in the education fund for substitutes and our overtime, and we'll review that as we do every year. For the benefits, we did see an increase basically in the health market again to our PPO, HMO, and our dental areas. We're reviewing that again to see hopefully those costs will come back down to what they were in the past, a little more modest. For our purchase services, our food service has increased. Our insurance has increased. Our legal and licensure has increased from our license area. So we look at our software. Those are up. And then one of the areas that we did see an increase is our game officials, right? All of our sports are back and they're in full full season, so we did see that increase. We did see a small increase in our course supplies from our graduation costs over the prior year. And we looked at capital outlay. That's very stable spending, so that was a very small amount of about $20,000. We did see a decrease in our other objects. That was really for some of our residential room and board. And then lastly, just a small amount for some of our replacement equipment. And that really kind of highlights some changes from the prior year of expenses in the education fund. When we look at the operations and maintenance, really it's the same. The costs go up as school functions increase. We did see a rise in that particular fund, primarily in the PPO insurance area. We did see the purchase services go up. We had quite a bit of costs in the HVAC area and some of our general repair and maintenance. That also increased. Our supplies and materials, we did see some of our natural gas consumption decrease, so that actually went down, and that has to do with temperatures. So a night like tonight would cost us more. If it was warmer, same time next year, of course, it'd go down. So we do see that fluctuate in each of our expenditure areas from year to year. There was an increase in new equipment, so we're back out there, we're using our equipment, it tends to break down, needs to be replaced. Our other objects is very stable from prior to this, and then we did have some non-capital new equipment that we bought. We did see the debt service decrease, and that's because we're paying off our bonds, so our principal and interest payments are being reduced. That leads us to transportation. So those costs are up. I did see an increase in our homeless transportation from the prior year. So when we look at the McKinney-Vento Act, that was an increase, as well as our field trips have increased, right? So we're back out there. We're taking students on the field trips. We did have increased costs in that particular fund in our HMO insurance. So it kind of depends what our employees elect. Our software costs went up. So those are things that we have like our trip software, our routing software, and some of our camera software that we have for that area. We did see a decrease in our supplies and materials. That is a decrease in our fuel costs, so that also fluctuates from year to year. A large increase in capital outlay was our bus purchases, which helped us reduce that fund balance that had accumulated over the last couple of years. And then we did see a decrease in some of our equipment for transportation. There really wasn't much of a change for IMRF Social Security. Those are just typical costs that come with wage fluctuation. We did see a large increase from $2.4 million to $9.9 million in our capital projects, and that's actually just because of our capital improvements that we've had. The only other area that I've seen an increase was our life, health, safety, and those because we made enhancements throughout the district. Okay, so here's the expenditure areas that I mentioned, so you can see how we've increased our expenditures as we've spent and invested in instruction. The same thing with our support services, which are the other areas that support the education. So this could be, those are typically our non-teachers. Our community services greatly went up. So that's our support outside our community to some of our private schools. Our payments to other units went down. That's typically those areas I mentioned. That's through Mid-Valley. And then our debt service, of course, is decreased. So those are like 5 key areas that we look at consistently from year to year that are in the AFR. It's a specific page that the auditor looks at in those areas. And then last is just some of the AFR summaries that I give you. So we had less revenue and more expenses, which we knew. So some of those are some planned activities. The $135,367 was actually some accumulated student activity funds that they'd had in the prior year that they'd spent down in this particular year. So that's reported as less dollars in the AFR. And essentially, I see I have a typo. That is not a 4.9 recognition. That is a 3.9 recognition. I can only dream of that. And then lastly, I think the largest factor on the bottom is this, where's our long-term debt? And you'll see in this year's AFR, we went from $95 million to roughly $85 million left in our long-term debt. So really, those are all good signs for our financials. Okay, any questions from the Finance Committee?
Anyone?
I just have one. Just in looking at the expenditure slide, the biggest jump was the support service explained. I think you did explain it, but if you could explain it again for in terms of the
Support services?
Yeah, the support services.
Yeah, so the instruction, we look at our teachers, and we look at the support services, we look at everybody else, right? So that's your administration, that's your O&M people, your buildings and grounds, your maintenance. That could be some of the other areas, such as our school psychologists or other areas that provide that support function. So that's really everybody else that's not the teacher that's involved in direct instruction.
So the increases the need for more of those services.
Right. It could be the need for more, or that we also attain full staffing from prior years. You'll see that reflected as well sometimes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
While we're switching here, could I just say thanks to Todd, and also thanks to Adrian, who I know spent a lot of time working with the auditors, getting that whole thing prepared. So, thanks to both of them. And Todd, one of the things I was thinking when, with Paul's comment about coming back and sharing some of this information, kind of some comparison stuff, maybe just looking at that recognition number with how we compare with some of our neighbors in that regard, I think would be an interesting thing to just be able to look at quickly, probably to, where do we feel like we're at?
I would also like to see the cost per student versus others.
Yeah.
And then it would be really neat to be able to go in and look at some of the levels of how they're doing in educating versus how we are doing in educating, and putting some kind of comparison there. I don't know if there's a direct correlation, should be, for the money you're spending. So it'd be kind of nice to see that at some point.
Actually, a great way to look at that, we could maybe do that, the Illinois school report card is, cumbersome sometimes, and it's not always the best, but it does a pretty good job of showing like per pupil expenditure and instructional expenditures across all districts, and you can like pull up multiple and compare, and then kind of pull up outcomes and compare. So we can maybe put something like that. Might be a good one to take a look at sometime.
Yeah, when I was at the III conference, one of the sessions we did that. We went through that report card, and it was really easy to compare all those things.
Yeah, a lot of time I'll have it because I'm doing the same thing, right? And I'll have it up, and I'll have 6 tabs, and I'll have our district up and another district up, and I kind of toggle between them just to look at some of those things, and it is pretty easy to do it that way. So,
all right, moving on. Item number 4.2 is the fiscal year 2025-2026 preliminary technology capital plan.
Thank you, and thank you for the time this evening. I want to thank also our Tech Task Force members. They've definitely been part of the process in helping us review, think about, and plan the technology capital plan. So thanks in advance for that. All right, the first slide I want to speak to is really our business system and student system projects that we're currently working on. These are information systems that really run the operations for the school district, whether it's the HR, payroll, finance side of the house, which the business system would serve, or it's our student system, which is the foundation for grade reporting, behavior, attendance, state reporting, and compliance when it comes to our student side of the house. The business system, as Todd mentioned previously, is that we are currently doing an upgrade with the same vendor to their latest platform of their product. This migration is going to be really a benefit to us at the end of the day in terms of having a modern platform. This newer platform is definitely one that was built in more recent years, and that shows in the user interface of the system and the capabilities it has. That also comes with additional enhancements in security, as well as features that we can use once we go live on that new version of the platform. The impact to our staff, we are looking at targeting this over spring break as the cutover. Ultimately, it's going to be, we think, minimal for most employees, where they're just using it to look at their previous paychecks or W-2, that type of information. But it will be most significant, and currently is a significant amount of time that our HR business teams are putting into making sure that we get the training in place and the conversion work done to make this successful at the end of the day, as well as our tech team that's helping to support that. On the student system side, we've been using our current student information system since 2006, 2007 when that went into place. In last school year, we conducted a request for information process, an RFI process, where we took a look at that are sold in Illinois and used by Illinois school districts, especially in the Chicagoland area. Ultimately, as a result of that search process, we landed on two things. One was the question of, did we see a compelling need to consider a change in the SIS system? And the answer was ultimately yes, we did. And two, who are the two finalists that we think we should have a larger team look into further and conduct an evaluation on this school year? And so we did that. We identified two finalists, and we currently have an evaluation process going on right now with those two finalists. We have roughly 40 staff members in total involved in the review process. And so that's a representation of preschool all the way through high school, central office. Really thankful for all those that are part of the process to help us make the best decision possible. We are anticipating a recommendation, potentially if there's a recommendation to move forward with a purchase of one of these SIS solutions, we would look to bring that forward for discussion here later this spring. With ultimately, if we did go forward with this, it would be a 26-27 school year go live. So about a year implementation, which is what we're seeing is kind of the norm in other districts who have gone down this road. I will say that kind of unlike the business system, that for most people this is not going to be as impactful for. This is one that's going to probably impact most employees in the district, certainly all of our teachers who are taking daily attendance, doing their grade reporting and such on the student information system, our main office folks. Nearly all of their processes rely on this information coming into play. Our families, ultimately our students who are going to check on this information. So this is a big undertaking and a big decision that we're trying to determine whether or not that's the right next step for us as a district. And again, I think that team of people that we have looking at this problem is going to be a good thing for us ultimately. Any questions on either of these two before we go on?
I do. I may have missed it.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we using currently, and then why the need for the change?
Yeah, so we are currently using a product. It's currently owned by PowerSchool, and the product is eSchool Plus. That is a product that, again, we put in about almost 20 years ago now as a district. And the biggest reason for the change is several years ago that product was acquired. And since that point in time, we really haven't seen it develop as much as we would want it to be. Our schools are feeling some pain points around those areas in terms of capabilities they can't do today. And when we looked at the market, we really saw that when it comes to scheduling efficiencies, potentially, there's different techniques or capabilities that these newer systems can do that ours really can't do.
Does the current vendor still support the system we're under now? I mean, many times at some point they just say no.
Yeah.
Right.
So the official commitment we have is through 2030 is the current support. As far as I'm aware, there's not been any determination beyond 2030. Yep. Great questions.
But
yeah,
we haven't seen them, it's fair to say, right? We have not seen them make improvements to that the way they have some of their other products, right? They basically, it's pretty much sitting where it's been for some time. And I think that's part of the reason for this nudge, right?
That's fair to say. Yep. Okay. All right, going into the capital plan in terms of our network infrastructure planning, which is ultimately where the costs are associated with the O&M side of the fund that we'll talk about. This timeline is one that I shared with the Finance Committee and the board last school year, where we talked about the multiple year approach to upgrading the network infrastructure. We're currently in that 2026 school year, or heading planning for that. And in this school year, we're targeting an update of our 6 through 12, our middle schools and high school, wireless access point infrastructure. we're looking at completing year 3 of our structured cabling overhaul across all of our schools. That work for 2026 would complete that project. And we're also looking to replace or update the firewall systems that we have in place today for the district. Those are ending, current contracts are ending here in the summer. And so those will be important to make sure that we have updates for. In addition, we are also currently going out for E-rate, which again is for infrastructure that connects students and teachers to the internet for K-12 schools and public libraries. E-rate project, we're looking at our wired switch infrastructure that supports that wireless network infrastructure. So we'll be going out for proposals related to the wireless switch infrastructure, the wireless access points, cabling, firewall replacements. All of those projects are E-rate eligible. And then you can see again in future years, we're still projecting out additional network upgrades over time here as we kind of phase these in over the next few years. And ultimately, this is the cap plan overview between both our Ed Fund and O&M Fund. And you can see some of the projects I've mentioned are listed here as kind of the highlights of what we're focusing on as part of this plan. I'll start with the Ed Fund here. The staff devices, we replace these every 4 years, and we have 2 years ultimately of replacements. We have one we're replacing roughly half each year. This will be that year where we would be looking to update and refresh our staff devices. Student devices, we're looking to refresh grades 1, 5, and 9 devices, so new devices for those that are entering those grades next school year. This is the last year, this is year 3 of 3 in terms of our 4-year rotation. That next year, 2027, we'll be looking at doing kindergarten 1, 5, and 9. So this is kind of the standard for 3 of the 4 years in this cycle. We'll also be looking to continue our proactive projector upgrades, and we'll be doing that at 2 elementary schools as part of this plan, as well as looking at additional school identified needs. I meet with the principals to take a look at what some of their concerns are or needs are in their schools, and we try to identify which projects we think we can incorporate into the technology capital plan as part of that work. Things like intercom or bell systems or those types of things we want to take a look at. I mentioned the student information system. We're including the first year costs, which would include projections for software licensing as well as onboarding, migration, data conversion, professional services that would be incurred in that first year. Additionally, we're looking at cybersecurity enhancements here to incorporate for a subset of our users. And we did also submit an application to be part of the cybersecurity pilot program. We're still waiting to hear back, but that's through the FCC. And so it's similar to the E-rate process, if you will. And there's roughly, I believe it was $200 million over a 3-year period for schools when it comes to cybersecurity. And I believe that the total submissions for applications was in the billions of dollars. So we'll see where that goes. Okay, and the last item here on the Ed Fund is we're looking at the digitization of student records. Last year, you might recall a project where we digitized the special education records. We took the paper copies that were in filing cabinets in this office, and we digitized over 600,000 pieces of paper to ensure that we could retain those digitally and get the benefit of being able to search and have more efficient disposal practices and such with that. We'll be looking to do the same thing for student records. This would include your permanent and temporary student records as part of this project. On the O&M side of the house, again, I mentioned to you the projects we're looking at here, all of which are E-rate eligible. So I'm not sure I would add anything more than that, but just those are the ones that we would be looking at here. When it comes to dollars, the ed fund total for these projects that are listed here is just under $1.4 million. And again, these are, Todd mentioned this in our previous, this would be recommendation for purchase outright. It does not include any lease or lease projections here. Only the SIS system would be potentially a partial, if you will, where that's going to be future annual payments. The O&M fund, that would total to just over $800,000. So the total tech capital plan would be roughly $2.2 million. And then we would have additional offsets here to consider. On the ed fund side, roughly $270,000 in offsets we're projecting. This is a combination of some grant funding that we received, as well as our technology services fees. That's a part of our enrollment fees. On the O&M side, we're forecasting around $200,000 in potential E-rate reimbursement. And so we'll know more as those numbers come back, and that will definitely be affected by what the total costs of the projects are. So when you consider the potential offsets here, our net budget impact here would be just about $1.75 million for all of the projects that we're looking at for 25-26. Last year, I shared these projections with you. You can see the circled area here for 2026 that we're forecasting that this year would be just under $2 million in the total budget for the capital plan. And the number I just gave you is slightly higher than that at just over $2 million. One of the biggest reasons for that is one of the projects that's listed on our O&M area. When we looked at budget numbers for that, we saw a significant increase in potential cost associated with that project. And so we factored that potential cost increase in. I'll say that we've heard for a few years that costs in this area would be increasing significantly. This was the first time we've seen what the actual dollars could look like. We won't actually know what the real numbers look like until we get proposals back on this equipment, and that won't be until closer to the end of this month. But I think we have a conservative number here for what the projection would look like.
Which project is that?
That's our firewall.
Oh.
Yeah.
If you look at the longer term trend, you see it, and your forecast now is it to start declining. Do you believe that?
I do, in the sense that part of if we look back at our timeline, you can see the projects that we're working on in those future years. The bulk of the costs currently when it comes to network infrastructure are the wireless access points and as flat as possible. There just really isn't a way to do your wireless infrastructure any flatter than I think the way we're approaching it. You can see we broke out the additional network switch infrastructure, which is our core network. We're forecasting that in 2029. We're looking at the rest of our network switch infrastructure, which really handles all of those non-wireless access point connections, our phone system, copiers, other wired equipment that would be in the building, and switch-to-switch communication as well in our network. So we're breaking those things out. So in that respect, I do believe that our numbers are conservative. And if it wasn't for the one program which we had or project that we had heard there were significant increases for, I think we would be probably speaking about the same numbers as we gave you last year in terms of projection.
Are the offset dollars some of the E-rate and some of the grant dollars and all that, or is that something different?
Yeah,
Or is
so
that
on
not
the
calculated in here?
Yep. So the O&M, that offset dollar, that's all E-rate projections. So that's between our Category 1 and Category 2, our internet service and equipment outlay there. And that's a factor of being 40% of eligible items for E-rate. It's not it's not 40% of the total cost, because some of the items that would be in some of these would not be eligible for E-rate. And the Ed Fund side, that is a combination of grant and fees. Most significantly, that's fee revenue coming in. Yep. Other questions?
I do have, if the cybersecurity, the pilot program, if we
Yeah.
don't become eligible or don't get are we not going to embark on that, or is that, it's only based upon our?
Yeah. So at this point, we have dollars in accounting for project that we would like to move forward with, regardless of whether or not the pilot comes through. Yeah. We would still recommend, and we've talked with task force about a smaller scale project. I would prefer not to go into too much depth on that topic, but we would be looking, there's dollars to still potentially support a smaller scale project there. Yep. Yep.
If you look at your SIS project that you're planning,
Mm-hmm.
typically a lot of times those rollouts, is that supported by the company we're buying it for? Are they providing the people to implement it, or will we have to go out and source that through consultants, other third-party organizations?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Thankfully, between in-house talent that we have and the party that we're purchasing the SIS from, both of them include data conversion services to help get the data out of your system, as well as bring it into their system in the format that they need. So it'll be a joint venture between us, our staff, and that SIS provider as well. Yeah, really good question.
All right. In the interest of time, we're going to move on
Yeah.
since we're running a bit late here. Thank you
Okay.
very much,
Thank
Mike,
you.
for that. All right. Item number 5 is future agenda items. You can take a look at those to see what's coming up. Item 6, items for recommendation to the full board. We have the fiscal year 2025-2026 preliminary technology capital plan. Do I have a motion to move this onto the full board?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That passes. Item 7, information legislative update. Nothing at this time. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Thank you.